If you love great stories, you've come to the right place. Subscribe to my channel to make sure you don't miss any new videos. Like and share this video with your friends if you enjoyed it, and let me know your thoughts in the comments below. The morning after the destruction of the Great Sept of Baelor, King's Landing did not wake up. It simply existed in a state of suffocating shock. The air was a thick, poisonous soup of ash, pulverized marble, and the lingering, sweet sickly scent of wildfire. From the heights of the Red Keep, the city looked like a wounded beast, cowering under a sky that had turned a bruised, metallic gray. Cersei Lannister stood on her balcony, her silhouette sharp against the morning light. She was dressed in black silk, but it wasn't the soft black of a widow. It was the matte black of obsidian. Her hair, shorn close to her skull, made her look more like a soldier than a queen. She felt no grief for the thousands she had turned to dust. To her, the explosion wasn't a crime. It was a necessary pruning of a garden that had grown too many weeds. The High Sparrow, the Tyrell girl, the bumbling cousins, they were all gone, their voices silenced by the roar of the green flame. "Your Grace," a voice drifted from the shadows of the room. It was Qyburn, his steps as silent as a spider's. He didn't bow, they had moved past such formalities. "The fires in the lower foundations have finally begun to cool, but something extraordinary has happened. The wildfire did not behave as we expected in the deep vaults." Cersei turned, her emerald eyes narrowing. "Explain." "Your father, Lord Tywin, had moved several ancient crates from Casterly Rock to the capital years ago," Qyburn whispered, his voice trembling with a mixture of fear and scientific ecstasy. "They were kept in the deepest cellars of the Sept's foundations, far below the surface. Among the ledgers and gold were 3 stones, petrified dragon eggs, gifts from the free cities to the Lannister kings of old. They were thought to be dead, Cersei, soulless rock." Cersei felt a strange prickle at the base of her neck. And now, the heat of the wildfire. It reached temperatures unseen since the fall of Valyria. And the blood, so much blood was spilled in that holy place. It wasn't just fire, Your Grace. It was a ritual of blood and flame, even if we did not intend it. They descended. The walk felt like a descent into the 7 hells. The further they went, the hotter the air became. The guards at the lower gates had stripped to their waists, their skin red and blistered from the radiant heat coming through the stone. As Cersei and Qyburn reached the subvaults, the smell changed. It was no longer the smell of death. It was the smell of something primordial, something ancient and hungry. The chamber was a hollowed-out cavern of scorched rock. In the center, sitting atop a mound of cooling, green-tinted ash, were 3 eggs. They were no longer the dull, lifeless stones described in the Lannister archives. They were pulsing. The first egg was a brilliant, shimmering gold, veined with cracks of glowing crimson. The second was the color of a lion's mane at sunset, a deep orange bronze. The third was a delicate rose gold, shining like a morning sky. Cersei stepped forward, her boots crunching on the charred debris. "The Targaryens claim the dragons were theirs by divine right," she said, her voice a low hiss. "They claimed only the blood of old Valyria could wake the stone. My father always said that the Lannisters were the true masters of the world because we knew how to pay the price for power. It seems the price has been paid in full." Suddenly, a sound like a thunderclap echoed through the vault. The golden egg shuddered. A long, jagged crack appeared on its surface, and a shard of shell fell to the ash. A tiny, wet, golden snout poked through the opening. Then a claw, sharp as a diamond and twice as hard. Cersei did not pull back. She watched with a terrifying, motherly intensity as the creature pulled itself into the world. It was a dragon, but it bore no resemblance to the silver and black beasts of the Targaryen legends. Its scales were the exact shade of the Lannister lion, a gold so bright it seemed to generate its own light. Its eyes, when they finally opened and settled on Cersei, were a piercing, cold emerald green. The dragon let out a shriek that was not a cry, but a challenge. It was the sound of a dynasty being reborn. As the other 2 eggs began to crack, Cersei reached out her hand. Qyburn gasped, moving to stop her, but she silenced him with a glance. She pressed her palm against the golden hatchling's snout. The heat was searing, the smell of her own burning skin rising in the air, but she did not flinch. The dragon, sensing her strength, nipped at her thumb, drawing a single dark red bead of blood. It licked the blood away, its tongue rough like a rasp. "Tywin," Cersei whispered, her voice thick with a dark, vengeful joy. The crimson-veined dragon emerged next, hissing with a chaotic, violent energy. She looked at its jagged scales and its arrogant posture. "Joffrey," she declared. Finally, the rose-gold dragon pulled itself free. It was smaller, more elegant, but its eyes held a quiet, calculating intelligence. "Miachella." Cersei stood up, the golden hatchling clinging to her leather-clad arm, its claws digging into the hide. She felt a surge of power that no crown and no throne could ever provide. For years, she had been told she was a woman in a man's world, a queen who had to manipulate and beg for scraps of authority. Now, she held the ultimate veto. "The world thinks the lions are dead," she said, looking at the 3 monsters she had birthed from the ash of her enemies. "They think the Silver Queen will come from the east and reclaim what is hers. Let her come. Let the Northmen howl in their snow. Let the sands hiss in their deserts." She looked down at the golden dragon, Tywin, who let out a small puff of smoke from his nostrils. "They have forgotten what it means to fear a Lannister," she breathed. "We shall remind them. We will burn their homes, we will melt their swords, and we will build a new world out of the cinders. This is not the end of our house, Qyburn. This is the beginning of the Gilded Age." The scene ends with Cersei walking out of the vault, the heat radiating from her body. As she reaches the upper levels, the sunlight hits the golden scales of the dragon on her shoulder. The light is so blinding that the guards have to shield their eyes. It is the first time in centuries that a dragon has been seen in the Red Keep, and as its roar echoes through the halls, the people of King's Landing feel a new, primal terror. The lioness has wings, and the world is nothing but fuel. The ride from the Riverlands had been long, but the stench of King's Landing reached Jaime Lannister long before the city walls did. It wasn't the usual smell of sewage and stagnant seawater. It was the smell of a guttering candle on a massive scale. As Jaime crested the final hill on the Kingsroad, his breath hitched. The great sept of Baelor, the crown jewel of the city's skyline, was gone. In its place was a jagged tooth of ruin, and the air above it shimmered with a ghostly, leftover heat. "Well," Bronn said, pulling his horse up beside Jaime. He squinted at the horizon, his hand instinctively resting on the hilt of his sword. "I've seen some messy breakups in my time, but your sister really outdid herself this time. That's a lot of stone to turn into dust." Jaime didn't answer. His golden hand felt heavy, a cold weight at the end of his arm. He spurred his horse forward, his mind racing through a gallery of horrors. He remembered the Mad King, Aerys Targaryen, screaming "burn them all" in the final hours of the rebellion. He remembered the look in Aerys's eyes, the same emerald fire that often danced in Cersei. He had killed a king to save a city from this very fate, only to return and find that the woman he loved had finished the job. As they entered the city through the Lion's Gate, the atmosphere was suffocating. The gold cloaks stood at every corner, their faces pale and rigid. The small folk didn't cheer, they didn't even whisper. They moved like shadows, heads down, terrified to catch the eye of anyone wearing a Lannister lion. Jaime reached the Red Keep and threw his reins to a stable boy without a word. He marched through the halls, his spurs clattering against the stone like a death knell. He expected to find Cersei in mourning, perhaps weeping over the body of their last son, Tommen. Instead, he found her in the Solar, a room that had been stripped of its finery and kept at a temperature that made Jaime's skin prickle with sweat. "Cersei," he called out, his voice cracking. She turned. She was standing by a massive brazier, her back to him. When she faced him, Jaime recoiled. Her hair was short, her eyes hard as diamonds, and perched on a heavy oak table behind her were things. They were the size of large hounds, their scales glistening in the firelight. One was gold, one was crimson, and one was a shimmering rose. They were tearing into a side of raw beef with a ferocity that made Jaime's stomach churn. "You're late, Jaime," Cersei said, her voice as cool as a mountain stream. "The war in the Riverlands is over. House Tully is broken. You should be celebrating." "Celebrating?" Jaime stepped closer, his eyes locked on the golden creature that was now looking at him, its throat glowing with a faint orange light. "I returned to find the sept in ashes. I find the High Sparrow and half the nobility dead. And Tommen. Cersei, where is our son? Tommen is gone, she said flatly. He betrayed us. He cast his lot with the fanatics and the little Tyrell whore. He chose them over his blood, so the gods took him. But look at what they gave us in return. She gestured to the dragons. The golden one, the largest, let out a low, tectonic rumble that Jaime felt in his very marrow. They are monsters, Cersei, Jaime whispered, his hand going to his sword. These are the things that destroyed the world once before. You saw what Aerys wanted to do. Aerys was a fool who couldn't control his own shadow, Cersei snapped, stepping toward him. The golden dragon hissed, its wings unfurling to reveal a span of shimmering gold. These are not Targaryen beasts. They were born of Lannister fire and Lannister blood. They are our children now, Jaime, real children. They won't jump from windows. They won't be poisoned by Olenna Tyrell. They will protect us, and they will burn anyone who dares to look at us with anything but terror. Jaime looked at her and felt a chasm opening between them. You've become him. You've become the Mad King. No, Cersei said, a cruel smile touching her lips. I've become the god he only dreamed of being. Sickened by the heat and the sight of the beasts, Jaime retreated to the armory. He needed the smell of oil and the cold touch of steel to remind him of the world he understood. He found Bronn there, sitting on a pile of leather armor, sharpening a long dork with a whetstone. You look like you've seen a ghost, Bronn remarked, the asterisk shink asterisk of the stone rhythmic and hypnotic. Or maybe something a bit more scaly. Jaime sat heavily on a bench, rubbing his face with his real hand. She has dragons, Bronn, 3 of them. Bronn stopped sharpening. He looked at Jaime for a long moment, then let out a low, appreciative whistle. Dragons? Well, that complicates the budget. I was going to ask for a castle in the Reach, but for dragons, I think I might need 2 castles and a very large shield. It's not a joke, Jaime growled. You know what they do. You've heard the stories of Field of Fire. Oh, I know the stories, Bronn said, his voice losing its mocking edge. But stories don't eat you. Those things do. Tell me, Sir Jaime, have you ever seen a man die of dragon fire? It's not like a regular fire. It's faster. 1 second you're a knight in shining armor, the next you're a puddle of melted tin with a screaming center. It's a bad way to go. She thinks she can control them, Jaime said. Control, Bronn laughed, a dry, rasping sound. You don't control a hurricane, Jaime. You just hope you're not in its way when it hits, your sister. She's a smart woman, I'll give her that. But she's playing with matchsticks in a room full of wildfire. Those things don't care about the Lannister name. They don't care about the Iron Throne. They care about meat and heat. And right now, King's Landing is full of both. Bronn stood up, testing the edge of his blade with his thumb. Here's the thing about dragons. They change the math. Before, if a lord didn't like you, he'd raise an army and march on your gates. Now, he just stays in his castle and prays you don't fly over his roof. It makes for a very quiet kingdom for a while. But eventually, someone gets desperate. Someone builds a bigger bow, or someone finds a way to poison the meat. She won't listen to me, Jaime said, his voice hollow. She looks at me and she doesn't see a brother. She sees a subordinate. Then you have a choice, don't you? Bronn stepped closer, leaning against a weapon rack. You can stay here and wait to be the first one she roasts when you say something she doesn't like. Or you can realize that the world just turned into a giant barbecue and you're currently sitting on the grill. I can't leave her, Jaime whispered. I know, Bronn sighed, sheathing his dagger. That's always been your problem, Jaime. You're a lion who spent too much time in a cage built by a woman. But mark my words, when those things get big enough to swallow a horse, they won't be asking for permission to hunt. And if you're standing between them and their dinner, well, gold doesn't taste very good, but it melts just fine. Bronn walked toward the door, leaving Jaime alone in the dim light of the armory. I'm going to find a cellar, a very deep, stone-vaulted cellar. I suggest you do the same. Jaime looked at his golden hand. It was beautiful. Expensive and utterly useless against the heat that was coming. He realized then that the war for the 7 kingdoms was no longer a Game of Thrones. It was a struggle for survival in a world that was about to be turned to ash. High above the armory, in the rafters of the Red Keep, a long, haunting shriek echoed through the night. It was the sound of the dragon Joffrey, calling for more. The great hall of the Red Keep had never felt so cold, despite the sweltering heat radiating from the queen's new pets. The iron-crusted windows were draped in heavy crimson banners, each bearing the golden lion, but the atmosphere was devoid of the usual courtly music or the clinking of wine cups. Instead, there was only the sound of heavy breathing, the terrified, rhythmic gasps of the remaining lords of the Crownlands, the Riverlands, and the few Reach lords who had survived the purges. Cersei Lannister sat upon the Iron Throne. She did not wear a crown of gold and jewels. She wore a crown of blackened steel, its points sharp as needles. But the true crown was not on her head. To her right, perched on the jagged blades of the throne itself, was Tywin. The golden dragon was now the size of a pony, his scales shimmering with an internal fire that made the air around the throne warp and shimmer. His emerald eyes scanned the crowd, pupils slitting as he tracked the movement of any lord who dared to tremble. To her left, on a raised dais, Joffrey and Miachella hissed at the assembly, their tails lashing against the stone floor like whips. "Lords and ladies of Westeros," Cersei began, her voice projected with a chilling clarity that reached every corner of the hall. She did not stand. She didn't need to. "You have heard the rumors. You have seen the smoke rising from the Sept of Baelor. You have whispered in your dark corners about the Mad Queen and the end of days." She paused, leaning forward. Tywin mirrored her movement, a low rumble beginning in his chest. A minor lord from House Stokeworth fainted, his body hitting the floor with a dull thud. No one moved to help him. "The Sept was a hive of traitors," Cersei continued, her eyes fixed on the remaining Tyrell bannermen. "It was a nest of vipers who sought to weaken the crown and sell our sovereignty to a man in a burlap sack. I have cleansed that hive, and the gods, the true gods of fire and blood, have rewarded my resolve." She reached out a hand, and Tywin lowered his head, allowing her to scratch the hard, warm scales beneath his jaw. The sight of a human touching such a beast sent a wave of visible nausea through the crowd. "The age of the stag is over," she declared. "The age of the wolf is a freezing memory, and for those of you looking toward the narrow sea, waiting for a silver queen with her Dothraki savages, let me disabuse you of your hope." She gestured to Qyburn, who stood at the foot of the throne. He stepped forward, holding a massive, scorched parchment. "We have received word from the Citadel," Qyburn announced, his voice thin and reedy. "The white ravens have flown. Winter is here. But more importantly, our spies in Slavers Bay report that Daenerys Targaryen has finally set sail. She brings 3 dragons of her own." A murmur of panicked whispers broke out. Cersei let it continue for a moment before Tywin let out a short, sharp roar that shook the very dust from the ceiling. The silence that followed was absolute. "She brings dragons," Cersei said, a thin, cruel smile touching her lips. "She thinks she is unique. She thinks the world will kneel because she carries the name of a dead dynasty. But she is a girl playing with fire. I am a queen who was born from it." Cersei stood up, and as she did, the 3 dragons rose with her. The sound of their wings unfurling was like the snapping of giant sails in a storm. "I do not ask for your loyalty," Cersei said, walking down the steps of the throne. The dragons followed her, their claws clicking against the stone in a terrifying cadence. "Loyalty is a fickle thing. It changes with the wind and the weight of a purse. I ask for your fear, for fear is eternal." She stopped in front of Lord Tarly, who stood rigid, his face a mask of stubborn pride. "Lord Tarly, you are a man of war. You know that battles are won by the side with the better steel. Tell me, what steel can withstand the breath of a god?" Randall Tarly looked at the golden beast looming over him, its breath smelling of sulfur and cooked meat. For the first time in his life, the legendary soldier looked small. "None, your grace," he whispered. "Correct," Cersei said. She turned back to the hall. "Go back to your keeps. Tell your people what you saw today. Tell them that the lions have wings now. Tell them that every debt will be paid, not in gold, but in ash. Anyone who does not swear fealty by the turn of the moon will find their castles turned into ovens and their names erased from history." The proclamation ended not with a cheer, but with a mass exodus of terrified nobles, stumbling over one another to escape the presence of the monsters. Later that night, the Red Keep was silent, save for the crackling of torches. Cersei stood in the map room, the floor-sized painting of the 7 kingdoms beneath her boots. She held a cup of wine in one hand and a small, golden dragon figurine in the other. Jaime entered the room, his face etched with a weariness that went deeper than bone. He looked at the map, then at his sister. "You've started a war that can't be won with armies, Cersei," he said quietly. "If you use those things to burn the lords, you'll have nothing left to rule but a graveyard." "A graveyard is a very quiet place, Jaime," she replied without looking at him. She bent down and placed the golden dragon piece directly over Winterfell. Then she placed the crimson one over Highgarden. "I am not looking for love. I am looking for an end to the noise. For 20 years I have listened to the world tell me what I cannot do. Now, no one says a word." From the shadows of the balcony, a large shape shifted. Tywin, the golden dragon, climbed onto the railing, his silhouette blocking out the moon. He let out a long, haunting shriek that echoed across the Blackwater Bay, reaching the ears of the sailors on the distant ships and the prisoners in the dark cells. Cersei looked up at the sky, her face illuminated by the faint glow of the dragon's throat. "The Targaryen girl is coming," she whispered. "Let her come. She thinks she's coming to reclaim her home. She'll find that the home she remembers has been burned to the ground, and a new one has been built in my image." She took a long sip of wine, her eyes reflecting the orange light of the dragon's fire. "Let the dance begin," she breathed. Thanks for watching this episode. Like, share, and follow for more interesting stories and narrations. Thanks a lot.